Welcome to my series in which I examine the cases presented in Missing 411 to determine if they are properly represented, or if there are discrepancies between how they appear in the book and what I'm able to find in my research. Today we are entering a new chapter in Missing 411 Eastern United States, North American Missing Farmers. Yes, that means we are still not actually covering the Eastern United States today. The chapter begins with a statement of intent. Mr. Paulides acknowledges that he is including some cases in this chapter where a body is found, as it may help add context to the cases where someone is never found. I actually like that idea. He also predicts that hundreds of people will come forward with stories about missing farmers after this book is made public. I don't know if that happened or not, but I don't recall seeing anything like that on the news. He also says that the only explanation for the cases he is about to present is either that the individuals were coerced into leaving the farm or they were abducted. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Those, according to Mr. Paulides, are literally the only two explanations for each of these cases. One other thing of note is that the cases he presents have a 30-year gap between 1956 to 1986 in which no farmers went missing in all of North America. That's fascinating to me, since a quick newspaper search of missing farmer turned up 1,286 results between the years of 1956 and 1986. I went ahead and read a few of these. All the ones I read did cover a case of a missing farmer. I think a rational person has to conclude that the 30-year gap is not a real thing, and is just another instance of Mr. Paulides cherry-picking cases to make some obscure point or make something seem mysterious. Going further into later chapters, we will see this behavior again, where Paulides will point out a gap in time in which no person went missing when that doesn't appear to actually be the case. This may not surprise anybody at this stage. He also points out the advanced ages of the persons missing in the following cases. Again, I think that we can probably disregard this as an actual pattern. But that's enough of theory, let's look at the cases. First up is Riley Amsbaugh. Riley, who was 55 at the time, went missing on July 25th, 1902, from Campbell Mills, Ohio. Riley went out to work the fields after breakfast, but did not return for lunch. He was last seen at 10 a.m. eating berries from a berry patch. A search consisting of 75 persons could not find Riley. While looking into this, I was able to find a little bit of extra context. Riley had a lot of money on him at the time, so there was some theories being thrown around about him being either killed for his money or being mugged or kidnapped or something of that nature. All that is moot, however, because he returned, alive and well, under his own power, on the 27th. The article that reports this states that he, quote, became temporarily demented and walked to Mount Vernon, close quote. He went on to live for another 26 years. Up next is E.C. Jones. Jones, of unknown age, went missing on November 12, 1903, from Webster City, Iowa. He had been married for just 30 days. He failed to return home after setting out for the cornfield. His horse team was found wandering the field with a tug broken and only one ear of corn in the wagon box. I was able to find that Jones was 21 at the time, and also that he ran away of his own volition over an argument that he had with his new wife. There's more information in the news articles and the sources if you're interested in looking into the particulars of that. So far, that's 2 cases of missing persons that were found, and neither of them were abducted or coerced into leaving the farm. But isn't that strange? I thought that coercion and abduction were the only 2 possibilities in these cases where they're never found. Well, considering that these first 2 cases aren't really even missing persons cases anymore, we shouldn't be shocked that Mr. Paulides was also wrong about the cause. Edward Gerke is up next. And spoiler alert, this is one of the cases where a body is found and noted in the introduction. Edward, of unknown age, went missing on June 11th, 1918, from Tomah, Wisconsin. He didn't return for lunch like many of the other farmers on this list. They found Edward lying in a ditch in his pasture with a broken neck and sand in his mouth. His clothes appeared to be partially burned. The coroner cited lightning as a possible cause. Mr. Polides says that lightning would not account for how his neck was broken or how sand got in his mouth. Let's review. First of all, I'd like to clarify that he didn't actually go missing, but in any case, he passed away on the 9th, not the 11th. Further, the coroner didn't cite lightning as a possible cause. The coroner's jury came back with lightning as the actual cause. It's not possible, it's what it was determined to be. Further, lightning strikes can cause broken bones. Falling face down into sand with an open mouth can cause sand to get in there. Looking at how the body was found, especially with the partially burned clothes, I think that lightning is a conclusion that most people would reach. But let's move on. Bernice Price. Bernice, of unknown age, went missing on March 22nd, 1923, from Ahwahnee, California. She wasn't a farmer, but she was the wife of a rancher. She went missing on a Monday night. The ranch sits on the Sierra Nevada mountains. Searchers believe that she went into the woods and just became lost. She was never found. Let's review. Bernice was 18 at the time, and she went missing on the 19th, not the 22nd. She was reportedly, quote, recovering from a nervous breakdown, close quote, and may have been delirious. But the most telling is the last point. It turns out that she was found. She had fled to her father's house, sick with fright because her husband had threatened to kill her. That kind of puts a better perspective on the nervous breakdown. Up next is William Pitsenbarger. William, who was 61 at the time, went missing on August 7th, 1931, from Holland Township, Ohio. He went to tend his farm, but he didn't return that night. The search and rescue went on for weeks. On August 31st, a searcher pulled a cover off a well and found William's body. An autopsy was never performed, but the coroner said that he hit his head while looking into the well, fell in, and drowned. Then the cover just miraculously fell back into place. Well, William was 62 at the time, but that's not a big deal. What is a big deal, however, is that the neighbors had suspected that he was in the well for a while and had checked a few times. They were unable to drag the bottom of this well, so they would just check every so often, and eventually his body floated up to the surface. While there was indeed no autopsy performed, the coroner was present when the body was removed from the well. He theorized that William, who had been in poor health for a long time, had stumbled into the well. But how did he stumble in with the well cover? A later inquest determined that he committed suicide. That is, he likely made sure that the shutter closed behind him, or got in such a way where the shutter was guaranteed to shut behind him. Drowning may strike most people as an odd way to commit suicide, and I would agree with the addition that I would find any method of suicide unusual. Suicide for most people, I believe, is pretty unthinkable. For those of you familiar with some of the stranger cases, such as Elisa Lam, that's the big name for this sort of thing, climbing into water sources like this isn't always unexplainable. Sometimes that's just what people choose. Up next is Clarence Clark. Clarence, who was 62 at the time, went missing on October 17th, 1932, from Palmyra, New York. Clarence went to check on cattle, then take a walk through the surrounding swamps. He did not return. The Syracuse New York Times published an article that read, 5-day search in woods for strangely missing farmer yields no clues. He was never found. Clark was known to be in poor health, and he suffered from regular fainting spells. His family feared that he had suffered one of these in the swamp and died. He was found 11 days after he went missing. His body was next to a creek in the northeast corner of his farm. It's believed that he died of an epileptic stroke and possible heart attack. Up next is Mr. Bell. Bell, who was 62 at the time, went missing on August 31st, 1936, from Winnipeg, Canada. Odd information is included in this case in the book, such as Bell's small stature and that he disappeared while wearing overalls. Everything appeared normal on his homestead. He was never found. I was able to find his first name, it was George. And lastly, he returned home under his own power 4 days later. He had hid from searchers due to being afraid about a joke someone made about a harvester. Besides saying that he was in poor health, the article doesn't go more into why he left and why he felt it necessary to hide. Leroy Williams. Leroy, who was 64 at the time, went missing on March 16, 1951, from Ackworth, Iowa. Leroy disappeared during a heavy snowstorm. Bloodhounds searched for hours and couldn't find him. The searches did continue, but he was never found. Let's review. Leroy did indeed disappear during a heavy snowstorm, but to clarify, Leroy and another farmer went out in the height of the very bad storm. When they got to the road that led to the farm, it was completely blocked by snow. Leroy opted to get out of the car and walk 3 miles to the farm. The other farmer, wisely, decided that he was just going to drive home and not work today. The problem is that Leroy had left the keys to all of the farm buildings and the glove box of the car, meaning that there was no way he could find shelter even if he made it the 3 miles to the farm. Leroy was also known to suffer from heart issues at the time. These are all things that are not mentioned in Missing 411. The other thing that isn't mentioned in the book is that he was found 11 days after he went missing. He had actually made it most of the way home, perhaps realizing his mistake leaving behind the keys. His body was only 600 yards from his house. Up next is an admittedly strange case, Ralph Stutzman. Ralph, who was 46 at the time, went missing on August 17, 1952, from LaGrange, Indiana. He went missing after leaving the farm to round up some cows that had gotten loose. A search didn't reveal where he had gone. The points in the book are all correct. I do want to add some context to the case. First, he was a gambler and had played cards well into the night the previous day. People close to the case theorized that somebody had a score to settle with him due to that, and he fled. Police made an odd comment to a family member years later. They can't look for him without his permission. They, the police, have always held that it's possible that he left voluntarily. I wonder if the police knew that he had left on his own volition, so they couldn't launch an investigation on this without his permission, hence the strange, we can't search for this missing person unless this missing person agrees to be looked for. This is the first time I've ever heard something like that before. To back this up, he once told a family member that he might run off if he kept being treated so poorly. His family also theorized that it's possible he fell into an abandoned well, since that area is known for having a lot of those. One of the sources I'm using for this is an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, where somebody is claiming to be the great-great-grandson of Ralph. It's a fairly interesting read if you would like to look into it more. It'll be in the sources like always. Up next is John Sweet. John, of unknown age, went missing on October 26, 1953, from Glacier Township, Illinois. He went missing after going to work on his tractor, fix a pig pen, and retrieve the wandering pigs. Some oil was found on a nearby barbed wire fence, leading people to believe that he went over the fence for some reason. He was never found. Let's review. John was 48 when he went missing, and further, his body was found 2 miles from his home by a hunter. He had died of natural causes, most likely a heart attack. He was noted to have high blood pressure, and his wife was afraid that something like this would happen while he was exerting himself chasing the loose pigs. He was still holding a cane pole and he had a pipe in his mouth. Louis Blair. Louis, who was 26 at the time, went missing on August 5th, 1956, from Provost, Alberta. He was never seen again after leaving to tend the field that morning. This area has a lot of lakes and rivers. A 3-day search could not locate him. Let's review. Louis was indeed seen again. He was found alive and well 8 days after he disappeared. He was unaware that the search was even going on and was just visiting a nearby farm while looking for work. Clayton McFaul. Clayton, who was 59 years old, went missing on August 15th, 1986, from Havelock, Ontario. He left early that morning to do chores, but he never returned for lunch. Several searches didn't turn up any evidence. Let's review. Clayton is one of the people who was indeed never found. To add some context, it was rainy that day and there were lightning strikes. A barn next door was hit and burned to the ground that day, though investigators had sifted through the ashes and couldn't find him. A key detail that is missed in the books is that he was reportedly a little mentally slow, and his family was concerned that he had become ill and disoriented. Anthony Holland. Anthony, who was 51 at the time, went missing on June 21st, 2009 from Cordell, Oklahoma. Anthony returned home from a gun show and left again to check on his ranch, but did not return. His truck was found 1 mile from Vanderwerk Lake near a remote part of his ranch. His keys and wallet were inside the truck, and his cell phone was just a short distance away. Dogs could not track him, and he was never found. This is a bit of a depressing case. Anthony's remains were found on March of 2011 on his property. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Let's bring this chapter to a close. I'd like to recall you to the claim made by Mr. Paulides at the beginning of this chapter. Quote, "The evidence from these cases indicates one thing. The victims were coerced into leaving their farms or were abducted from their land. No other explanation fits." Close quote. So how do the cases line up? 5 left of their own will. 6 died on or near their farms. And 2 could have been abducted or coerced to leave, but are unknown since they are still missing. Clearly, other explanations fit. Mr. Paulides is either suffering from advanced tunnel vision or is pushing a narrative for his own reasons. Either way, my faith in him as an investigator is completely destroyed. Here's what I mean. What is an acceptable accuracy of an investigative journalist who is just presenting facts? 90%? 75%? Maybe just 50%? I realize that this is an opinion, but it's not rhetorical. I want you to really think about this. What accuracy is acceptable for a published investigator? Keep that number in your head. Was the number you had earlier for a published investigator's accuracy sub 30%? Is it even morally or ethically acceptable to do such poor research that less than 1/3 of your published information is correct? I'll let you be the judge of that. Thank you for sitting through this longer than usual video. In the next video, we will actually start the Eastern United States section with the Midwest for some reason. Minnesota is up first. Until then, take care.